Assalamu alaikum students, welcome to your course TEFL-II. Yes, this time I told you in the last lecture that we'll be talking about teaching of English as a foreign language, and our perspective is different this time, right? Last time we talked about theories, what are the different teaching methodologies, and this time in this semester we are more practical. We are trying to put those theories, those techniques into practice. So today's lecture is on what is the role of teacher. You know, teacher is very important, and particularly the language teacher, because the language teacher is the one that you see is a key figure in a language class. So that's why you see the whole lecture, this lecture number 2 is on role of teacher, that what are the responsibilities of a teacher to have an ideal language class. So let's start today our lecture on the teacher's role in the oral lesson. Now, dear students, this might be you are confused that what is oral lesson. So the oral lesson means that teaching, that what should a teacher do while teaching. So that's why we call it oral lesson, or in other words we call it teaching in a language class. So let's see what is the first role of a teacher in a language class. Yes, the slide is there. Motivator, right? So yes, motivator. Who is a motivator? Yes, teacher is a motivator. And the teacher, in fact, why is a motivator? Because he motivates the students for what? Learning a language. So being, in fact, expert in TEFL, being student of this subject, we need to what? Motivate our students. Because naturally, unless your students are motivated, they cannot learn this language. Right? So we talked about in the last semester as well that you see language learning, right, is a process, and it is not an easy process. So that's why we, being language teachers, we have to play our part in the best possible manner. So that's why motivation is important, and the first role of a teacher, of course, in an oral lesson is motivator. Now the point is what? When you talk about the motivator, which things of teacher in fact can motivate the students, right? Very simple, you know that when you motivate the students, it means you prepare them for that particular lesson, right? So in other words, in simple words, my dear students, we can say that we prepare our students for learning that language. So motivation, yes, it plays an important role, right? I mean, if you are unable to motivate the students, then you need to improve your motivational skills. So that's why how can you be of course a good motivator if of course you know what is motivation. And here of course I would talk about different motivational theories as well, right? There are so many theories. You must have heard, and I might have talked about in the last semester, the theory X and theory Y. So what does theory X is? Theory X is, well, that of course human beings are not willing to learn. Well, students, so the role of a teacher is very important in a language class. So what is the first thing we're talking about? That the motivation is important. We need to motivate our students for speaking, for listening, for reading, and for writing, right? Because these are the skills that we teach. And yes, you might be thinking that which skill needs more motivation. So I would say that all skills, and particularly when you teach writing skills, and you know that writing is a complex skills, and there are so many sub skills are involved in writing, and writing needs more concentration, more practice. So that's why this skill needs more motivation as compared to other three skills. But it doesn't mean that other skills, of course, while teaching listening, reading, right, or speaking, we need not to motivate. So every good language teacher, he starts with this motivation, and that's why once we'll move on, you will see that we will have a stage that is called a warm-up stage, and in that stage what we prepare the minds of the students. So now the point is that how can a teacher motivate the students? So the answer is simple, that personality of the teacher is important, right? Now what comes in the personality, right? I mean, first of all, that how a person looks, right? So the looks of the person definitely motivate the students. If a teacher comes in a proper dress, a formal dress, if a teacher gives a decent look, so naturally this appearance of a teacher motivates the students. Because my dear students, yes, being the teacher, students in fact make their teachers as role models. So therefore the appearance of a teacher is very important. Dress of the teacher is very important, right? So and the teacher must care for it. Whenever this teacher, of course, goes to the class, so he in fact wears proper dress. He gives a neat and clean look to his students. So that, why again that is so? Because one way is that students learn the dress code. They understand that it is not for the students that, you see, dress is important. It is also for the teacher. So being TEFL student, and of course when you talk about the role of a language, the teacher, so his personality also motivates. And then again the way he talks, again it's important, right? The way he moves in the class, right? And again sometimes, you see, you must have seen that some teachers, what they do, that you see they make the commitments and they fail to meet those commitments. So that's why the teacher should be very careful while giving a statement. And if he gives a statement, so I mean he should try to stick to it. So and the solution is, yes, we are all human beings and teachers are human beings. At times it happens that, you see, you give a commitment and you feel that you are unable to make it. So this can easily be conveyed to the students, and students also understand. But it should not be a habit formation that every day the teacher gets late from the class, or in every class the teacher leaves the class in advance. So once in a while it happens, it's okay, it's natural. But point is, if you make it your habit, so then what happens? The student in fact start doing the same. If you expect discipline from the students, so first of all the teacher should in fact set examples for it. So personality, you know what is personality? Yes, personality is sum total of your nature and nurture. So my dear students, personality, how you look, how you talk, how you make commitments, right? And the language, your of course overall your nurture and your nature reflects in fact. And being a teacher, when you come in front of the class, yes, definitely you reflect your personality, you reflect your knowledge, you reflect your integrity, loyalty for the organizations. So therefore in the class the teachers need to be very, very careful. The teacher need to keep in mind organizational objectives. Teacher need to keep in mind the syllabus that he has to cover. So that's why, I mean, this way he can motivate in fact. Overall attitude is also important. The teacher needs to sympathize with his students, right? He needs to have empathies for the students, right? He needs to be sensitive. Fine. And a good teacher, of course, encourages. So when you encourage students, definitely students get motivated. So encouragement also motivates the students. If student does something good, yes, appreciate him, right? And this appreciation in front of the class, yes, gives a big heart to the students in fact. So whosoever has been appreciated. But on the other hand, if you ridicule a student, so it definitely in fact demotivates the students. So encouraging students in fact really motivates students for that process of language learning. And the teacher should not be narrow-minded, right? because once you are narrow-minded, yes, so you cannot motivate the student. So open-minded, teach things with open mind, accept any kind of comments from the students, and keep things in the class, because it is a class, it's a community. Communication is going on between teacher and the students. So things should be open. In fact, again, it means that sometimes the teacher come and they share, of course, any bad experience of the class. So again, if you are open-minded the person, you accept, if sometimes the resistance comes from the students, right? So being a good teacher, we take those resistance positively. At times it happens that you might have seen that some students, they give negative feedback in the class, that whatever is being taught, they are unable to get it. So the teacher should accept, teacher should not be biased here. At this moment of time, the teacher should take that comment positively, and he should try to improve if that comment is valid, if majority says that. And if it is not valid, then through negotiation, things can be settled down. Again, flexibility also motivates the students. So teacher needs to be flexible, and he in fact need not to be rigid. If you are a rigid personality, then you cannot have open discussion. So particularly for the language class, flexibility is important on the teacher's part, and that really helps students, in fact, to learn language, and that again another, of course, a cause for what? Motivation. And then again, the teacher should not be sarcastic. His tone should is very important, how he talks, right? The language that he chooses, again, it's important. So sarcasm, you see, when you in fact make fun of this one of the students, so this demotivates. Definitely, of course, and this is really important, of course. Sometimes it happens that, well, maybe the teacher develops a very good environment in the class, and sometimes even teacher passes a comment, so students don't mind. But particularly if it is a co-ed system, if it is co-education there, so both the teacher, if it is male or female, yes, they need to be careful. They must not pass any comment that demotivates the students, and of course the teacher should not make fun of the students. And then again, you see what appropriate personality, roles according to the situation of our older, particularly when you are teaching adults. This is very important. Children sometimes, of course, their memory may be short, so they cannot retain things more. But once we are teaching, in fact, adults, so over their students, yes, you need to keep in mind that, well, who are the students? They're all mature students. So your authority, of course, mean as a paternal, maternal, or fraternal. In fact, what is paternal? Right, authority figure. Fine, that you are in the class. Yes, authority teacher, in fact, what? He has an authority, but it doesn't mean that he, in fact, does not let anybody communicate in the class. It's a language class, right? And you are a language teacher. So, yes, there is that, of course, you have power, fine, because if you don't, exercise your power, maybe some students would dominate and others would suffer. So you have power, but the way you exercise that power is important. Again, of course, at times you have maternal, right? Affectionate. Like paternal, of course, the fatherly figure, of course, father has power in the family. So then you have again maternal, right? Maternal, power that you have, that is affectionate. At times, father is, of course, gives commands, right? He has power and he exercises power. On the other hand, there is a mother, so who becomes more affectionate. And then again fraternal, right, from permission, right, where you can permit. So dear students, these are, of course, the first point that was that under motivation, what you have personality of the teacher, which is very important. Personality is, in fact, of course, your looks, your talks, yes, in fact, show a lot about the teacher. So a good personality motivates students well. So of course, in personality, I told you that again, how you look, how you talk, how you stand near the rostrum, how you sit if you are sitting, right, and how you move in the class, fine, how you use your teaching aids, whiteboard, or all these things. So personality is very important. Well, students, so competence and confidence is another factor, right, that can motivate, in fact, the students. So now what is competence? Yes, very simple word, that the teacher should be competent enough in his skill, that whatever he is teaching, if he is teaching a speaking skill, he should be competent in that, or if he is teaching writing skill or reading, whatever skill that the teacher is teaching, so he or she must be competent in that. And again, not only the competence but also the confidence. So both are important, that you need to be good at, of course, that subject that you are teaching. And how can you be competent? Yes, of course, initially you have to work really hard. And I feel, of course, a good teacher keeps on improving himself, right? Because once you keep on working to improve your skill that you are teaching, if you're a language teacher, if you are writing skill teacher, if you are a speaking skill teacher, so what you do, you keep on, in fact, refining your skills, you keep on working on your skills, so that you're working definitely in fact make you competent. And similarly, once you keep on improving yourself, that also gives you what? The confidence. So the teacher must be seen by the students to be both competent and confident, even in the limited area. Is that clear? So he must be competent in what? In the clarity of thought. Whatever the teacher says, he must be clear. Now the point is, how can he be clear? Of course, that and in clarity mean whatever the concept he is teaching, whatever the component of the language he is the teaching, so he must know that component. If the teacher is not clear, so even his voice quality would not be clear. So if you are in doubt about certain things, so your voice would not help you, your body language would not help you. So that's why being a teacher, your clarity of thoughts is important. And how can you be clear? Yes, first put efforts, try to read things. And still, if you feel that you are unable to get it, yes, ask others. Find there are people around, they are willing to help you out. There is internet, there are different sources. So there are, lots of resources you can consult, you can read, and you can have clarity of thoughts. And of course, you can overcome this muddling thinking. You get muddled when you don't know anything, right? And even you don't try to learn more, of course. So this urge for learning, in fact, helps you to overcome the muddled thinking. And also, if you fail to read, if you fail to improve, so you cannot be clear. So your thoughts should be clear, and again, your thinking should not be muddled, because if you are confused, if the teacher is confused, so ultimately he will pass on that confusion to the students. And again, you know that of course the teacher's confusion multiplies, because he confuses then 40 students. So it's better for a teacher to remove his confusion before going to class, instead of being there in the class, right? And then, if he tries to confuse lots of students. So that's why whatever the concept you are teaching, simple example is if you're teaching past tense, and the teacher is not clear about the past tense, so how would he, teach the students? And particularly in this age, when the students are, of course, they are the students of this new age, students of technology. So yes, they are aware of certain things. So you never know which kind of students are there. Sometimes their knowledge is, of course, updated, right? Teaching, for example, conditionals, teaching about different, of course, language expressions. So if the teacher, in fact, does not know those expressions, so he would not be able to help the students. So the good thing is that the teacher should be clear, and this motivates the students. And how can he be clear? By reading, by researching, by asking others, by having conversations is important. And then, of course, care in preparation and efficiency in the execution, of course. prepare. I mean, yes, a prepared minds, of course, can be a successful teacher. So you need to prepare for the class, right, in advance, and that's why we'll be talking about lesson plan. That definitely, of course, when you make a lesson for a class, so what happens? You prepare for the class. So lesson planning is important. So when you make in fact a plan for the class, so that plans in fact, and you try to execute it. You see, so if you pre-plan a class, so the chances are there that you would execute it well. And if you, I mean, plan in the class, so you might be in trouble. Some experienced people may overcome the problem, but naturally not. It is not everybody. I mean, everybody can't do that. And the point is that maybe some teachers, they feel that they are experienced and they can maneuver activities in the class. But the good point is that if you want to have a smooth flow in the class, so you need to have, I mean, of course, a lesson plan with you, and also you need to know in advance how would you execute. And then, of course, the language being taught, this does not mean the teacher must know everything, right? Merely be competent within the limitations required by the teaching, in fact. I mean, of course, the teacher is, I mean, of course, amongst you, and that, I mean, we cannot expect that the teacher must know each and everything. But at least whatever the skill he is teaching, in fact, if he puts efforts, if he goes to his class prepared, right, and then he can, in fact, of course, be successful. And this preparation of a teacher, right, his clarity of thoughts, right, definitely motivate the students. So this is another the factor. We call it what? Motivational factor, that is competence and confidence of the teacher. So dear students, another factor is, that is what? Teacher's ability to interest students. This is very important. That, I mean, if you are teaching speaking skill or the listening skill or whatever skill you are teaching, if you are unable to develop interest of the students, that once they would be good at speaking, how this speaking would help them, right? If you are good at writing skills, how that writing would help them out in their job, in their university, fine, wherever they are. So this is very important, that if you develop that interest of the students in that particular area that you are teaching, again this motivates, right? If you're teaching, for example, business communication, and you tell the students that, well, this is a subject that would help you in job hunting process. This is the course which would help you in your interviewing process. This is a course that would help you in making presentations. So, I mean, once they know, so definitely they would take interest in that class, because they would know the importance of this subject. So that's why, I mean, this is another factor, that is teacher's ability to interest the students, to develop interest to the students. That, I mean, how? Of course, that, you see, otherwise they will get bored. Fine. If the students are bored, they will not pay attention. So learning may not be meaningful, right? If the teachers, if the teacher, helps to students develop their interest, so learning would be fine. On the other hand, if the teacher is unable to do that, so students would be least interested in the class, and they might bunk off, so the learning would not be meaningful. And again, they would be easily distracted, get up to mischief. I mean, in a noisy class, you might have seen that, well, if the teacher fails to manage the class, so the class becomes noisy, right? If there is, of course, a properly managed class, a properly disciplined class, definitely shows that the teacher is in command and that the teacher is managing things well. Another point is, of course, that is the teacher must provide interest through how? How can he provide, students? Yes, identifying and catering to the student interest in terms of topics, their hobbies, ambitions and dreams. If a language teacher if the teacher asks the students about their hobbies, their ambitions and their dreams, in fact, and then, of course, whatever the language item they're teaching, how can they use this item to give that dream or to give that hobby, for example. So then it would definitely in fact interest the students that well whatever they are learning, fine, it would help them to give their hobbies, it would help them to give their the dreams. For example, you see, if I were Prime Minister, right? So again, then people I would in fact give social benefits to all students, in fact. So point is, yes, you could see that, I mean, if you teach this conditional sentence, so probably they would take interest. Again, variety of language points, right? Skills practice, interaction, pair work and group work, humor and problem solving. All these factors, my dear students, yes, they in fact develop interest of the students. In a class, humor is also important. When you cut a relevant joke, a sensible joke in the class, so what happens, students? Yes, you see, this in fact motivates the students, because this is a small, in fact, what you say, a small, I mean, a time where the students think that, well, I mean, this is possible in the class, and humor, I mean, sensible humor does a lot, because it relieves the tension of the students, and they start in fact retaking things, of course, and they prepare themselves for the next topic. So humor is important. General interaction in the class is important, fine, and of course asking students, fine, and using, of course, variety of language points. So sometimes you integrate the skills, asking students about their hobbies. So all these things, what they, I mean, it is the teacher's ability to interest students. I mean, if the teacher tries to know about the students and the student feel that, well, the teacher is interested in, teacher in fact recognizes their students, so the students put more efforts. So that's why, of course, I mean, this good interaction between the teacher and the students helps, in fact, improve learning process. So this is another factor for motivation. Again, showing the need. I mean, when you, being teacher, when you show the needs, of course, to the students, show the need in terms of what? The syllabus and test, what the students do not know, situational roles in which the students may indeed need to function. So again, it's important that when student shows the needs to the students, well, for example, this is what the syllabus will cover in this course, and then, I mean, these are the important areas that students do not know, and they need to know, in fact. For example, if you are going to talk about conditional sentences, and you know that students do not know about those conditional sentences, and I mean, it can be done that, of course, the teacher asks some questions, right? Fine, or he uses some conditional sentences, and once there is no reply, so again, this is what, that it is a way to show the students the need for conditional sentences, or, for example, sentences begin with if. Is that clear? So dear students, this is what, once you do it, you do what? You show the need for that, for a particular exponent that you are going to teach. So once you show that and you create a situation, right, you make that, I mean, teaching more situational. So this definitely, of course, help the students, because you know that's, I mean, of course, I think, in fact, you see, whatever the student need, and if you teach as per their needs, so they would take interest and they would definitely be motivated. So this is another the factor that can be used to motivate the students. One, what? Show the need, showing the needs, right? That this is, I mean, talking about, for example, you are teaching reading skills, and you tell them that what reading gives them, for example, that once you read, you prepare yourself to read. Once you read, you get ideas. Once you read, yes, you improve your writing. So it may mean that, and you can ask them that how many of you, in fact, read on regular basis. So, and then how can you develop these reading skills? So in this way, once you show the needs to the students, so my dear students, they would be motivated. Okay, so this was the first role of a teacher, that was motivator or motivation, and we talk about some factors that can motivate the students. Second role of the teacher, my dear students, is even, you see, inform and informant. Now what is informant, right? You know the word inform, you know the word information, and this is what informant, right? So even this, the role shows that the teacher should have information, right? Earlier we talked about that the teacher should have competence, right? And should have confidence to manage the class in the best way. But here, what we talk about, that teacher should be informant. Now what does it mean? That is the most obvious role of the teacher is as an informant. They can be in the following context, right? The teacher should in fact, I mean again it is that the teacher's knowledge, generally we believe that should be more than the students, or the teachers in fact the way he manages things, right? Because if he comes prepared in the class, so again it shows that, I mean, he is of course an informant. So first of all, that how can he, I mean, he be an informant? New input, initial presentations. So when you present any language item, so again here that you must know that in this time, in this class, what language items can be taught, right? So initial presentation, right? It means here that you are going to teach them a new language item, in fact, a new expression or idiom or any tense or direct and indirect narration. So how you present. Presentation is the stage when you present things to the students, right? Example, this is for example, you give them a formula, or you get formula from the students if you are using what I mean, the descriptive approach. So dear students, being an informant, what you do, I mean, initially of course the how you present, presentation is important. So that's why your impressive presentation shows that you know. And if you struggle, if a teacher struggles in presenting a concept, so again it is in fact of course on the teacher parts it's a weakness, right students? So that's why initial presentation is important, that I mean whatever concept you are going to teach, the teacher needs to know much about that. And then of course extension of already presented material, that I mean once the thing you are teaching, for example you are going to teach in fact past simple tense, and then again this is extension of what we talked about yesterday. Maybe you talked about the present tense, we talk about present simple, or and now today we are going to talk about past simple. So again this is an extension of from present to past, right? And maybe tomorrow we'll talk about the future. So whatever the students know, they assume knowledge, fine, and from that we are moving to the present. This is called what? Extension. Students know how to give their daily routine, and this is the time that they would tell you what did they do yesterday. Clear? So this is what we call it, extension of already presented material. That yesterday we talked about, I mean present simple. Today we are going to talk about past simple. Or yesterday we talked about first conditional, and today we're going to talk about second conditional. Is that clear? So this is what we call it, extension of presented material, and first one was initial presentation. And then of course revision. You see, the teacher of course if is able to revise things, reminding students of forgotten points. Because if when you teach, I mean all the three conditionals, then maybe students would be confused. Right? So how to remove that confusion, that you revise things, and a good teacher in fact keeps on revising things, right? So whenever you teach a new concept, and if you have something that you see you feel that student might be confused, so you can revise things like we do in this lecture as well, right? Of course whenever I start a new lecture, so I review the last lecture so that you would pick up the thread, you would recap whatever we did in the last lecture, and then that knowledge would definitely help us in proceeding this lecture, right students? So this is what I'm saying, that you see what? New presentation, second extension of what? Of already presented material, and the third thing is what? Revision, that you revise, you're reminding students of forgotten points, and then again explanation. Yes, here mean you explain things. Fine. And how you explain? Of course, you give examples. How you explain? Maybe, of course, you try to expose things. In fact, you can involve students. Fine. And of course, for explanation, the teacher, again, he should be informant. He should have knowledge. He should have suitable examples. And for this, the teacher has to read a lot. Fine. He's reading, his conversation. And again, a good thing is that, of course, if you have to discuss some examples in the class, I mean, it's better if you discuss those examples in your staff room with your the teachers, because once different teachers in fact review that example, so they can give the comments, and once you in fact exploit that skill in the class, I mean, you discuss that example in the class, so you enjoy it, in fact, and students also, I mean, give positive feedback. So that's why, of course, these things are there, that the teacher, of course, he needs to be informant, mean he must of course have information of whatever he is teaching. And again, here another meanings of informant may be that the teacher should know what is going on in the class, right? So the teacher must be in the know. Fine. So the activities in the class, of course, would be in the information of the teacher. So the teacher needs to bear in mind what and how much information to give, when and how to take what. A ridiculous, of course, example: do not teach the students complex sentences when they are unable to make simple sentences. Again, the point is that, well, you need to go with the level of the students, that if you're talking about the complex sentences and you know that they are unable to make the simple sentences, so the sequential order is important. We need to understand that what students have already done, right? And that's why, of course, I told you that the recap of the previous lecture is important, recap of the last session is important, right? Because if you recap and then again that recap, of course, maybe this recap helps those who are absent in the class, right? And this recap, in fact, prepares the students, those who were present. This recap even helps the teacher as well, right? Because that recap, in fact, is in his mind, and the teacher knows how to proceed. So the recapping the session is important, of course, revising things, and then again extending the knowledge is important, because if you mix a few things, all simple, complex, compound, right, and complex sentences in a day, so chances are there that students would be confused, right? So if you teach things, yes, you need to move in the sequence. And again, here, while planning your lesson, while designing your syllabus, you need to know that how to move forward, which things students have already done, to avoid repetition, and again sometime to sequence your lecture. So this is what important as far as informant is concerned. Another role of a teacher is, my dear students, conductor. What is conductor, in fact? Right? Maybe, of course, you have words that again, this can be a verb as well. Example is conduct and conduct. Right? Here what we have conductor, right? The person who conducts that, right? So here the teacher, of course, in addition to what we have just talked about, informant and of course motivator. See, informant, motivator. This is the third role of a teacher in the class, for language class particularly. What the role is? Conductor. The teacher should be a very good conductor of the class. So meant the person who conducts the lesson, right? It is the person, of course, the key person in the class is what? The language teacher. So that is important role. So what is it? Being a conductor, what do? You elicit what? Words, sentences from the students instead of simply giving information. It's very easy that, of course, if the teacher comes prepared and he has sentences, he has words, and he starts talking. So a better approach would be that if he elicits sentences, what he does, that he gets sentences, he gets words, fine? For example, well, what is the book? And another word, well, ball. Give me another word, yes, boat. Give me another word, bull. So the teacher, keeps on eliciting information, right? He tries to get information from what the students. So a good teacher, what he does, that he elicits sentences. He elicits words from the sentences. And yes, some teachers do, in fact, they keep on asking the questions and they speak half sentence, and of course they ask the students to complete the sentence. So this is a good thing, that of course get words from the students, because if you get words from the students, so this in fact is a message for the students that you see they have to be active in the class, they participate in the class, and they expect that the teacher would be asking them questions. They would not sleep in the class, and they would be active, the participants. But if the teacher just gives them information, or teacher spoon feeds them, so that may not serve the purpose, right? So dear students, when you are in fact being of course you're conductor of a class, so what do? You elicit words or sentences from the students instead of simply giving them information. Clear? Also, that you are a conductor, what you do, you initiate rule and check that the students have grasped the concept involved, right? So when you start a rule, in fact, and then you see that either they have got it or not, in fact. So because you are conducting that class, you give a rule and you initiate the rule, in fact, and see whether everybody has taken it or not. Sometimes it happens that maybe of course the 10% people or 20% people get the concept, and maybe they have done it earlier, and the teacher thinks that everybody has taken it. So again here the teacher being conductor, he needs to know that whatever this concept has been discussed or is being discussed, yes, has everybody grasped it or not, right? If more than 90% people has grasped it, it means that of course people know it. But if he feels that well only 5-6 hands of course they raise and they give feedback, it means that the teacher should redo that and should of course keep everybody on board. So this is very important, that when you initiate a rule, you need to know that everybody has done it. And then of course students explain things and answer students' queries, very important. Whatever is being taught, you need to explain. And of course, how would you explain if you are informant? How would you explain if you are prepared? How would you explain if you have read a lot? And then of course, if there is any questions, do answer the questions. And sometimes it happens that maybe the question comes and you are unable to answer. So because yes, definitely there are 40 students in the class, and there are 30 students in the class, there are 25 students in the class, there are 25 minds. So on your part, the teacher goes prepared in his class, but maybe at times he accepts a question that he has never thought of. So the better is the teacher writes that question, and once he comes out of the class, and then in the class he tells the students that well, I will let you know later on. So then you come out and then you feel that this thing was not in your mind, and you did not accept that the question there, so you prepare yourself. Fine, students? Okay. Again, that's of course when talking about conductor, you need to in fact handle aids well. Teaching aids, right? For example, you have the visual aid, you have the whiteboard you are using, or you have charts with you, or you have the multimedia. So you need to handle aids well, or you have the OHP, overhead projector. So you are a conductor, you must know how to use a podium, and how students should use podium, how to use a board, how to write on a board. In micro teaching, we'll be talking about all these things, that being a conductor of class, what should you do, how to take attendance of the students, how to have check on the student that who is coming in, who is going out of the class, right? And who is a troublemaker, who are the serious students, in fact, right? So these things you keep in mind, that who sit at the back and who sit at the front, why people leave the front row way vacant. So what are the problems here, and why people are reluctant to express themselves. Therefore, being a conductor, you need to know, and we'll be talking about these things once we'll have micro teaching. Then of course, being a conductor, you provide a model for students to imitate, right? For example, of course, you write a sentence on the board that in fact if he works, comma, he will succeed. So this is a model that you give to students, and then of course you want them to follow, imitate. This model can be provided orally, or it can be given in writing, or it can be given in handouts. So then you expect them to imitate that. Again, you give them what? Cues. Fine. Your clues are very important. Once you give cue to the students, so they move in the right direction. Otherwise, some students, they become clueless. So these cues are important. These are some signals that you give to the students, so they try to follow it. Again, the teacher is of course, he monitors, right? Again, because teacher is a good manager as well, right? So he monitors things, and you know that, of course, one of the principles of management is monitoring things. So the teacher keeps on monitoring the students, right? So in monitoring, what we will say, the resources, how resources are, which resources are there, and how these resources have been used, of course, by the teacher and by the students. And again, the teacher must monitor that these resources should not be misused. For example, sometimes it happens that you say, if in a class the 3 tube lights can work, why to turn on all the 4 tube lights, right? Or if you feel that, well, if there is AC has been working since morning in the class, and of course, I mean, it's cold in the class, so still students keep it on. So again, the teacher should monitor these things. And then other, of course, the resources, the students' resources, and of course the administration resources. So this is very important. The teacher should, being conductor, he must monitor, check whether the students are being doing the activity in the way required. I mean, if it's a group work is there, or it's an individual work is there, right? Is a team work is there, so teacher must monitor. He might visit, in fact, what? Different, you could say, he might visit different groups to find out whether, I mean, he has, whether the students are following it or not. Well, students, so another role of a teacher is very important, that is diagnoser. Very simple. What? Diagnose. You see? By the way, who diagnoses things? What comes to your mind? A doctor. Yes. Fine. So you go to a doctor. What does doctor do? He diagnoses the problem. What else does he do? And then once the doctor diagnoses that disease, then he, in fact, maybe sometimes he in fact writes certain tests for you, in fact. And after those tests, in fact, he sees that report, and finally what he does, that he prescribes medicine. So the teacher is, the doctor is the one who diagnoses a problem. And to diagnose that problem, he asks you, and he writes the test, he writes thyroid test, blood CP, or urine test. So after seeing that report, that doctor, what he does, he prescribes medicine. So here means the teacher is also a diagnoser. I mean, how a teacher can be diagnoser? You see, so he must be able to diagnose what should be taught, right? I mean, like I told you earlier, that if the students are weak in simple sentences, and if I teach them complex sentence, it means I am a poor diagnoser. Clear? I mean, here, we are in this semester, and we talked about TEFL-I last semester, right? So if I start these things there, so again it means that I was unable to diagnose. So the teacher, in fact, must diagnose, of course, the students' problems, that where does a student stand, right? If the student is unable to speak, in fact, right, a sentence, and of course, if you ask the students to take IELTS, if you ask the students to take TOEFL, so different things there. So this is what the point is, that when you're being a teacher, you are a diagnoser. So what you do, you're showing the need to learn an item, right? When you diagnose a problem, you diagnose, and from that diagnosis, you come to know that what to teach to that students, right? What are the needs of that student? Fine. What are the needs of that students, and we need to perform what need analysis of the students, right? And how can you do it? In Writing Resource Center, what you do, you hold interviews with the students, of course, and that interviews, you come to know that what are the areas which in fact need to be done, and which area the student is good at. If in that interview, in that diagnosis, we feel that, well, the students are good at speaking, but he is weak in writing, so we focus more on writing skills. Or if you feel that the student is good at listening skill, but he is unable to read, or is unable to write. So that's why that the placement tests are conducted in every good language center. So those placement tests help in fact authorities to determine where does the student stand. So again, this is the role of a teacher, that he needs to diagnose the problem, and once he diagnoses the problems, then he prescribes, of course, medicine, or then he prescribes that which level that student should be placed. Should it be in the foundation level, should it be in the certificate level, or the diploma level, or at the advanced diploma level, like universities do in fact. So again, if and it happens that if some students, they say, well they want to be in diploma course, and but the management thinks that no, they should be in certificate course, right? So again, this is the problem with the placement. If a student comes in the diploma course and after some time he feels that he cannot go on with that, so it would be injustice if you put that person in the diploma, the one who is suitable for certificate. And again, if somebody is suitable for diploma and we put it in certificate course, so again it would not be difficult for the person to manage, and then he would be in trouble, right? If a good student goes in the lower course, right, or if a bad student comes in the upper course. So that's why the placement test should be improved, and the teacher, of course, who places, in fact, again, teachers being diagnoser, either you diagnose the problem through their writing skills, by seeing their writing skills, by evaluating their writing skills, all by talking to them is very important. So evaluating the students, in fact, the leader's errors in terms of what the need for remedial work, it's very important. Well, students, so what we do, that being a diagnoser, a teacher, what he does, that he evaluates the learner's errors in terms of the need for remedial work. So once he diagnoses the problem that student struggles in basic grammar or basic sentence formation, so then of course he can be placed in a better course. And never forget to praise what the students do know, right? Again, of course, once you diagnose, of course, that if the student does well, we must appreciate. And if the student does something wrong, it depends how you react to it. Do you provide a correction to that student, or you correct the student there and then? Is that clear? For example, if the student says that I did not went there, now the one way is that no, I did not go there. And second way could be, well, you want to say you did not go there. See, so it depends on the teacher, that how he reacts. And if the student say, yes, I went there, yes, you went there yesterday, fine. So dear students, this is the point that we need to know, that appreciation is very important. If a student does a good thing, we must appreciate, and if he does something wrong, then you need to be very careful how to handle the situation, particularly with the adults when you are teaching adults and the language teaching. So these are what the role is that teacher should be diagnoser. Another one is corrector. The teacher should correct. Of course, teacher correction is accepted, right? Teacher is, of course, authority in the class, fine, and he is informant in the class. So that's when he corrects, and of course the students, in fact the learners of that language, accept that correction. And the teacher, the good thing is that the teacher should be competent. He should have confidence in that correction. If the teacher is confused about that correction, so then again that confusion will go on, right? So teacher should in fact know that whatever he is correcting, this is right correction. So the teacher must come to a decision about what, how much, when and how to correct. This is important. Again, it's a decision making, that of course when to correct. Like I talked earlier, that well, immediately you correct, right? Or you take a pause and then you correct that student silently, or you correct in public. Sometimes it happens that you see when a student makes a mistake and the teacher corrects them there and then, and there is a laughter in the class, right? And even some students, they make fun of that teacher, like that he cannot speak or he is very weak. So this is the one way, in fact. So that becomes a problem, a matter of embarrassment for the one who has been corrected, right? So again, if the teacher is able to motivate that, well, correction is there, we all make mistakes, and these mistakes help us to learn a language, right? If the teacher does it, and if that environment is congenial, useful, everybody knows it's a class and we all make mistakes, there's no problem, then it's okay. Otherwise, if you feel that it's a beginning and that there are sensitive students in the class, and some students mind if they are corrected in this way, and they might not mind teachers' correction, but they might mind if the students make fun of them or the students have a laughter on their mistakes. So here, this is very important that when you teach adults, we need to decide what and how much, in fact, should we, if a student keeps on making mistakes, and should we ignore it initially, or you should keep on correcting them, and of course, how to correct them. Immediately we should correct, or later on, or what you can do, you can provide a correct version. For example, could we, what, like in this way, the what part is, could be recently taught items, commonly recurring errors, what a student has asked to have corrected, errors just too horrible to leave uncorrected. So dear students, in the what part, what we see that about what to correct and when to correct. You see, for example, like you see the word, if the student writes in fact men's instead of men, so the teacher feels that he needs to be corrected there and then. And sometimes if the student is fluent and he has made a mistake, the student says, okay, teacher feels that, well, it's a minor mistake and it can be overcome with the passage of time. So that is what the what part is there, and how much depends on the confidence of the student, right? According to the level, age and character, and on the aim of the activity, right? If the teacher feels that, well, with every sentence he needs correction, or if he feels that, well, teacher considers the age factor, in fact, of course, that each person is adult, so then it should be in breaks, in intervals, correction can be done, because more corrections sometimes creates a problem for the students. And if the teacher corrects the students continuously, so the teacher sometimes, the students gets demotivated, and some students even leave that well, they cannot go on with this class, and particularly with adults. So in this case, you can correct, but not that much, of course. So as far as correction is concerned, it depends on the situation, it depends on the age of the person, again the situation, right? Again, this sensitivity of the person. Some students, you see, they are very open. If the teacher corrects them on spot, they don't mind, and they take it as an opportunity, and they really appreciate the teacher that of course this was the mistake and the teacher has corrected, and this is a source of learning. But some students, and particularly the adult students, of course, they have the problem. If they are corrected, fine, on spot, you see, and the other students naturally, of course, in the class, they make fun of them, and then this might demotivate them. So here the teacher needs to be, of course, needs to play a vital role, that how to correct, when to correct, and in fact, whom to correct, fine, and what is the right time for this correction. Then, of course, when the time in accuracy oriented activities, for example, drills, as soon as possible. Of course, there's a drill going on for the accuracy. If there are activities, if there are drills for the accuracy, so as soon as possible. In fluency oriented activities, role plays, discussions, later, fine. Errors can be noted down and can be discussed with the students later. So again, the time is very important, time factor is very important for the correction. So we discussed, see that when, if the drill is fluency oriented, So you can, for example, there's a drill going on, you can do it immediately after that. Or if the fluency oriented activities, for example, role plays and discussions, you can do it later. Errors can be noted down and they can be discussed with the students later. How? Yes, remember that no or that's wrong plus a correct version is not the only way. Gestures could be used, right? So being when your teacher is a corrector, it's very important that, I mean, simply saying no, fine, it might demotivate the students, right? And again, if you know plus correct version, fine, is not the only way. Gesture could be used, right? Your body language can be used, your paralanguage can be used to correct, in fact. So dear students, that is mean the how to correct. So dear students, in fact, what we talk about in this role of the teacher, if I conclude today's lecture, so the teacher must seek to encourage the students, right? What is it? Students, motivation is important and teacher must work on it. And this encouragement involves all aspects of the teacher roles, fine. Next thing is that the teacher should have sympathetic attitude, not demanding beyond the students' capabilities, not overcorrecting, praising what has been well done. Clear? I mean, if the teacher corrects and this correction is, I mean, if it is overdone, again it can be a problem. And if teacher is not sympathetic towards the teacher, or if the teacher is sarcastic towards some students, or the teacher is biased, right, against some students, so again this can be a problem. And you need not to be more demanding, in fact, you see, you need to know the capabilities of the students. Fine, considering their capabilities, you can in fact demand certain things, and appreciation is a must, of course. So dear students, now it's time to give the summary of this the lecture, very important lecture. So today we talk about what? We talk about role of a teacher, right? And mind you, the role of a language teacher is very important. If you compare with other language, I mean the teachers, fine, over there, because maybe the teacher just passes on information on engineering, on computer sciences, fine. But here, if it is a language learning the process and you are, I mean, a student of TEFL and you are teaching the language, so your role is very important. So you need to motivate the students. Again, what do? Your personality motivates, right? How you look, it motivates. How you talk, it motivates. How you enter the class, it motivates. How you execute the class, it motivates. How you speak in the class, it motivates. If you speak well, if you are audible, yes, naturally students would enjoy. And if you are speaking low and only 10 students get your voice, again it's a problem, because student take it, some student take that the teacher is not confident, he cannot speak up. Yes, if there is a problem, that is you can ask for mic, but if it is a small class and without mic, if you can do, that's ideal. So motivation is important. You can see the attitude of the students, your commitment to teacher's commitment to his profession, right, also motivates the students. So there are various factors for the motivation we talked about, you see. And then informant, the teacher should be what? He should have information, right? He should, I mean, in the informant we talk about that what is the initial presentation, right? And then we talked about that, well, extended knowledge, that once whatever we talked about yesterday and you extend to it, fine, you move on, that we talked about first conditional, today you move on to second conditional, or we talked about you see the present simple tense, we move on to past simple tense, right? So whatever we talked about yesterday, you extend, you consider the students assume knowledge, and then you move on. And then of course we talked about that revision is important, right? So keep on repeating things, because once you repeat things in the class, and of course, and if in a language class, people keep on absorbing and they keep on, of course, then they start, because this is in language class, whatever the students learn, they come out and they start using it, right? So if something, an exponent has been taught in the class and it has been repeated the teacher continuously, fine, and the students come out and they start using it, and once they start using it, that in fact language item becomes part of their language. Again, a good conductor of a class. Yes, you need to conduct things. Whatever the technique is going on in the class, whatever activities in the class, right? The teacher must conduct those activities, right? Everything should be in his know. His mental presence in the class, his physical presence in the class is important, right? Whatever activity is going on, whatever group work is going on, a pair work is going on. So being a good teacher, he keeps on visiting all the pairs or all the groups. They're working in the class. And then of course the teacher is a diagnoser, right? He diagnoses the problem, fine, and then in fact he places the student in a particular the section, of course, and then again knowing the student is has the basics of grammar, and then we move on to. So of course mean that a good teacher is a diagnoser, and finally of course a teacher is a corrector, right? Again, when you correct him to children, of course, when the students of course mean elementary level, of course low level students are there, then you may have a different policy. But when you correct adults, right? So over there you need to be extra careful. You need to know that how much to correct, when to correct, in fact, and how to correct. It is very important. When the activity is of course fluency oriented activities, fine, you can correct later on. And then of course the activity is what? Accuracy based activities, right? So you can correct there and then, fine. So, or the point is that what you can do while the activity is going on, you write down the problem and you can discuss at the end. For example, if you have speaking on that my personal profile, then people say I belongs to, right? It's a common mistake, of course, that everybody says I belongs to Faisalabad, I belongs to Lahore. So you listen to all those and at the end you might say, well, I belong to. Clear? So in this way, what? The teacher can be a corrector. Well, students, so these are of course what the roles of a good language teacher are there, that he tries to correct the students, fine, and while correcting, what he does, that he keeps in mind the situation, he keeps in mind the time factor, he keeps in mind the age factor, he keeps in mind, in fact, of course, that the person's profile. Correcting an old person in a language class, yes, you have students of 40 years old, you will have students of 35 years old, will have students of 50 years old. So, teaching people at this level, of course, is a challenging task. So, correcting these people, of course, you need to be very, very careful at that. Similarly, when you diagnose the problem, you need to be correct in diagnosing the problems, because if you misjudge, right, the students, of course, if you are unable to diagnose the problem, so I tell you that the student will be suffering the whole semester. And why? The fault is with the diagnoser, because if the teacher in fact fails to diagnose that the level of the students, so once if the person has not been placed in the right group, in the right course, so it means that of course it is not his fault. It is the fault of the person who has evaluated him, who has diagnosed him. So failing to diagnose would put the students in trouble. So you need to be good at, you need to be rational, you need to be sensible while diagnosing things. And again, of course, mean that you need to conduct every activity with mental presence and of course physical presence, and you need to be informant, and again mean more, of course, motivator. So these are of course what the role of the teacher are important. A good language teacher needs to be competent in the class. A good language teacher needs to be in fact confidence, right? He needs to be confident in the class, of course, but confidence motivates the students. Your performance motivates the students, and in this way you can be a good the teacher. Personality of a teacher in fact incorporates all these things. So with this, students, thank you very much. See you in the next class. It's goodbye.